going on, y'all? Welcome to Think and Drink with Jules and Joya. Got her over here, Joya. Anyway, I got my sparkling water, San Pellegrino, the best, my favorite tasting, and also full of electrolytes. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. Today we're gonna talk about stress. And just hearing that word, you might feel a little bit stressed out. And especially in these times, we've been stressed, we've been frustrated, angry, anxious, we feel despair, and rightly so. But there are things we can do to get out of the stress and to mitigate some of these emotions. But I also want to make it clear that feeling these aren't bad. There are no bad emotions, right? But we need a balance. And so again, today I'm going to give you some tips on how to mitigate some of these emotions and how to create a balance. So first we have to talk about, what is stress and what are the effects of stress on your health? We know it has mental ramifications, but it also has physical ramifications. There's a hormone called cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And again, this isn't a bad thing to have this around. We naturally have a rise in cortisol in the mornings. It wakes us up, it makes us feel more alert. It can help break down substrates for energy, but too much of it can also have negative consequences. It can break down muscle, it can make us feel, extremely stressed, wired, antsy, etc. And we also know that chronic stress is damaging to our longevity. I'm gonna get a little bit nerdy for a second, bear with me. We have these things called telomeres. So our DNA, at the end of them, think of it like a shoelace. Our DNA strands are the shoelace, and at the tips is that little plastic on the shoelace, and those are our telomeres. And as those cells divide and as the DNA replicates, our telomeres get shorter. And the role of the telomere is to protect the DNA. It's to make sure that genetic information is replicated properly. But again, every time that cell divides, that DNA replicates, the telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter until eventually they run out. And that leads to dysfunctional cells. Essentially, that cell dies. And as we age, telomeres also get shorter. And this is natural. But there are things that can make telomeres shorten at greater rates than normal. Now, one of those things is chronic stress and chronic exposure to cortisol. Different research has shown that chronic exposure to cortisol can shorten telomere length. So all that to say that stress can have negative repercussions in the short term and the long term. Now, how can we reduce stress? Here are a couple acute things you can do and a couple of long-term things you can do. So we're gonna start off with breathing. You hear often, when you're stressed out, when you're anxious, take a deep breath. It's very important. And the reason why is because we're activating our diaphragm. So we want to specifically breathe into our stomachs, expand our rib cage in the back, expand down to our pelvic floor. And that's activating our diaphragm, which is our main breathing muscle. One of the reasons this is so important is because the diaphragm is innervated by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve starts in our cranium, comes down all the way into our diaphragm. And the vagus nerve, if you know the term vagabond, someone that wanders. So similarly, the vagus nerve is the wandering nerve. And the vagus nerve is responsible for down regulating. So I'm going to introduce a couple terms: parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is when we're upregulated, when we're stressed, when we're angry. It's the fight or flight mode. And again, it's not bad to be in this state. You need it if you're training, you need it if you're in danger, but we need to have that balance and get into parasympathetic, which is our down-regulated mode, or rest and digest mode. And this is where we can recover, this is where we can relax. To get deep sleep and to get restful sleep, we need to be in this mode. Now, again, our diaphragm innervated by the vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So breathing into our stomachs, and particularly through our nose, is really important for stimulating the diaphragm and the vagus nerve. Now, Start off with an inhale of maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and you want to focus on the exhale, because the exhale is where we're really controlling our diaphragm. And we want to make the exhale longer than the inhale. So if you breathe in for 5 seconds, try to exhale for 8 to 10 seconds. And again, this might feel uncomfortable. As you get better and better, you'll be able to breathe and exhale for longer with less discomfort. You become more efficient. Once you get to that state, you can also add a hold or a breath hold. So you can breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for hold for 5 seconds and breathe out for 8 seconds. And other strategies are box breathing, where you are gonna breathe in for a certain amount of time, hold it, breathe out for that same amount of time, hold it, and then breathe in. So it's kind of like a box. So breathe in for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, exhale for 3 seconds, inhale for 3 seconds. So each side or each breath is the same duration. That's why it's called box breathing. Now, breathing, you can combine that with a lot of different practices. Today I'm not going to talk about exercise, but having a movement practice is important. And we often emphasize high intensity training. That's all fine and good, but we need to also balance that with low intensity training. Going on a walk, going on a bike ride, going on a hike, being out in nature, just playing, right? These are things that lower cortisol, that get us in a more down-regulated state. And again, you can also do things like meditation. I'm not gonna talk about that today, but you don't just have to pick one thing or another. You can combine these different modalities and tools. Now, that leads me to acupressure, and this is a little bit more nuanced, but again, very effective in the short term. And acupressure is essentially it's the concept of applying pressure to different points in our bodies, which are supposed to help us down-regulate, to have different functions. And this is in line with Eastern medicine. Regardless of whether you believe it, try it out for yourself. And again, this is a great way to affect yourself in the short term. So here are 4 different acupressure points that we're going to utilize. The first one is the third eye. So with all of these points, you're going to use an index finger or 3 fingers. So you can use 3 fingers or 1 finger and apply pressure firmly. Not too intensely. So again, you're going to take index finger or 3 fingers and you're just going to apply pressure firmly. Just like that for 30 seconds to a minute. The next one is right in between your nipple line, or right on the nipple line in between your nipples. So if you feel a little notch right here, it's going to be right above that. And again, you're just going to apply pressure firmly. Next is pericardium 6, and this one's specifically on the left wrist. So you're going to take 3 fingers, you're going to apply them right below the wrist here, and you should feel 2 tendons here. You should be able to physically be able to rub on them. And in between that is where you're going to apply pressure. That's pericardium 6. So again, apply pressure, or find those 3 fingers. That most bottom spot is where you're going to apply pressure. And again, just holding firmly like that. And the last one, this is my favorite, is in your ears, actually. So you're going to start on the inside of your ear. Just like this. And you're just going to rub. You're just going to rub all the way through the ear. So you get to the outer ear, and then from there, I just like to rub all the way down to the earlobe, and just rub the earlobe. So again, all these different points have different functions, but overall they help reduce sympathetic tone and increase parasympathetic tone. Now, something that's very overlooked are chemicals. And again, we have this negative connotation around chemicals. We think they're unnatural, but anything that we eat, food, is made out of chemicals. So this focus is more long-term, but it's focused on nutrition. Now, we have 2 main chemicals or neurotransmitters called serotonin and GABA. And each of these are responsible for being calm, being in a stress-free mood, reducing anxiety. And when we have an imbalance of neurotransmitters, we also have dopamine, and we also have acetylcholine. When we have an imbalance, it can lead to different dysfunctions. And part of that is mood or mood disorders. So serotonin and GABA are really important. And again, what we eat affects our levels of serotonin and GABA and the rest of the neurotransmitters. So for serotonin specifically, we want to focus on consuming B vitamins. And I'm not advocating for taking a supplement. If you need to, that's an option, but you can get these from foods. So natural foods is my go-to. So some of the best sources of B vitamins are liver. That's like the highest source of B vitamins, and I know most people won't eat it, but you can also get it from beef, you can get it from eggs, from spinach, and from nuts if you don't eat animal foods. Now the next nutrient that you want to focus on is tryptophan, and this is in particular of particular importance. Tryptophan helps form serotonin, and it's an amino acid. And this is found in foods like chicken, turkey, pork, as well as some nuts. So again, focusing on B vitamins and tryptophan are great ways to increase serotonin levels. Now, another thing of importance that people often overlook is gut health. About 80 to 90% of serotonin is formed in the gut. So if you have poor gut health, then that means you probably aren't producing optimal levels of serotonin. So eating foods that are rich in probiotics, such as yogurt and other fermented foods, sauerkraut, things like that, are really important. That helps feed healthy bacteria to our gut, or introduce healthy bacteria in our gut. We can also eat foods that are rich in prebiotics, so foods that are not ripe or have certain types of fiber. Unripe bananas, jicama, pectin, which is in apple skin, so eating apples with the skin. These are rich in prebiotics, so you want to get a mix of both prebiotics and probiotics. And last, you want to avoid eating foods that damage your gut. So for some people that's gluten, for other people that's inflammatory oils, vegetable oils like canola, other refined seed oils, grapeseed oil. Just you want to stick to avocado oil, walnut oil, butter, ghee, and coconut oil, so more saturated fats to cook with. Olive oil is another great source. You want to avoid heating it up to high temperatures though. And last but not least, GABA. GABA is our main inhibitory neurotransmitter, meaning that if you're deficient in it, you're probably overstimulated. And this makes sense. We're on social media all the time, we're watching the news, we're watching Netflix, we're constantly stimulated, but we never destimulate. So GABA is really important to have in balance, especially if you are prone to anxiety and stress. Different foods like magnesium-rich foods are extremely important for GABA production. Foods such as dark leafy greens, dark chocolate, avocado, yogurt, and fatty fish are rich in magnesium. I mentioned B vitamins for serotonin production, but specifically vitamin B6 is very important for GABA production. So again, beef, turkey, pork, nuts, avocados, and foods like that are rich in those B vitamins. Glutamine is another important amino acid for GABA production. It's rich in connective tissues, so if you drink bone broth, if you eat chicken with the skin, fish with the skin, that's very rich in glutamine. It's also very important for gut health, and again, I mentioned with serotonin, most of it is produced in the gut, so it goes hand in hand. Nuts, cabbage are also rich in glutamine. And one more important amino acid is taurine, and this is primarily found in animal foods, so dark meat, chicken, turkey, shellfish, and dairy are very high in taurine. So again, we have to look at long-term strategies for reducing stress. I hope some of these helped you out. Again, just to review, breathing through your nose, breathing into your stomach. That's going to activate the diaphragm, which activates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. We want that breathing practice, and we can incorporate that into our movement practice of something like yoga, meditation, low intensity exercise. You can also use acupressure acutely to help us down regulate. Again, you can press in your chest, press in between the eyebrows, rub on your earlobes, or in the wrist. And then the long-term strategies, in addition to exercise, breathing, and things like that, are nutrition. So the foods that we eat affect not only our physical but our mental state. Both of them are interconnected, and you can't affect one without affecting the other. I hope some of these helped you out, and I hope to catch you next time on Think and Drink with Jules.